Good morning. I wish to thank you for providing me with this opportunity to address the International Conference on the Political Economy and Social Work Response. I am pleased to see that the conference is putting emphasis on the human right to water and sanitation. What does the human right to sanitation mean? What is its value added when it comes to interventions in the area of sanitation and water? As you know, the UN General Assembly in 2010 recognized sanitation and water as a human right. Subsequently, the Human Rights Council has repeatedly reaffirmed this recognition. In September this year, 1 month ago, the Human Rights Council agreed on the definition of the human right to water and sanitation for the first time. And it was a decision taken by consensus and also co-sponsored, supported by a record number of countries. So the resolution says that the right to water, to safe drinking water and sanitation, entitles everyone without discrimination to have access to sufficient, safe, acceptable, physically accessible and affordable water for personal and domestic uses, and to have physical and affordable access to sanitation in all spheres of life that is safe, hygienic, secure and acceptable, and that provides privacy and ensures dignity. Currently, at the UN General Assembly, a similar resolution has been negotiated and will be adopted during this current session. To me, human rights, well, it's basically about common sense. It gives us guidance and a reminder that water and sanitation have to be safe, meaning that it should not make people sick or kill people. Water and sanitation bills should not force people to compromise with other human rights, such as the rights to education or health. I've met people who told me they have to choose between paying the water bill or the pharmacy bill, and obviously this is unacceptable, obviously from an ethical perspective, from a moral perspective, but also from a legal human rights perspective. The human rights framework also forces us to ask the difficult questions. I mean, to look at those who don't have access and to ask ourselves, what kind of people are these? Who are they? Where do they live? What is the color of their skin? To which ethnicity do they belong? To which caste do they belong? And what are the reasons that are leading them not to have access? What are the reasons that perpetuate their exclusion? What are the reasons that justify or explain, there is no justification, that explain the lack of political prioritization of their situation? During my missions, I've always encountered incidences of lack of access to adequate water and sanitation, where people belonging to a specific group are categorically neglected or even ignored compared to the rest of society. As you know better than I do, there is often stigma. There are discriminatory attitudes and practices within societies as causes of inequalities. In my last year's report to the Human Rights Council, I examined more thoroughly the issues of stigma. Discrimination alone, in my opinion, does not fully explain the reasons why entire groups of the population are left with no sanitation and water. In certain extreme cases, people are not just experiencing exclusion and marginalization, their situation is perceived as legitimate and justified by societies and sometimes even by authorities. I put forward a recommendation for states to undertake a comprehensive study on stigma based on a multi-stakeholder participatory process to identify its drives in relation to the rights to water and sanitation. Initiatives and activities on the ground like yours are a very important driving force to break stigma and realize the rights to water and sanitation for all without discrimination. Another issue that I've been working on a lot recently is the post-2015 development agenda. As you know, we are being governed, global development is being currently governed by the Millennium Development Goals, which are coming to an end, well, very soon, in 2 years' time. And as you might also know, the world has started to think, well, already some time ago, about the upcoming development agenda. And I've done the same. And I am of the view that the biggest gap of the current agenda is its blindness, its indifference towards inequalities. And one of the things that I've been pushing for is the inclusion of a commitment to eliminate progressively inequalities in the post-2015 agenda. Inequalities persist because of the reasons that I mentioned, but at a very practical level, the current global monitoring of progress under the MDG framework simply does not require states to pay attention to the vulnerable and marginalized groups of people. So states can go for the low-hanging fruit or success stories to achieve the goals, while not improving the situation of the most marginalized. So in order to achieve universal access, which is one of the things that states have now on the table, they want to go and aim for universal access to sanitation, to water, education, etc., in order to, or the full elimination of extreme poverty. So in order to achieve these types of universal access, studies have shown that this will not be possible unless we start now addressing inequalities. And what I mean to say is that we need now to start targeting the most disadvantaged and the most marginalized and lift them up. If we don't start now lifting them up, it will be impossible by 2030 or 2040, whenever, whatever date, end date for the next development agenda the member states decide, we will not be able to achieve universal access. So for me, committing to eliminating inequalities is a proxy indicator to assess whether states are taking seriously their commitment to achieve universal access to whichever goal. Addressing inequalities is not only a human rights and moral obligation, it also makes sense politically and economically. Yes, reaching out people living in rural areas does cost money, but please think about the cost of not addressing them. We all agree that we do not want a world with instability caused by inequalities, and we do not want a world where millions of people suffering from waterborne diseases occupy hospital beds and miss out school and work. So over the last 2 years, I have been working closely with UNICEF and WHO under the umbrella of their joint monitoring program for water and sanitation to develop concrete proposals for goals, targets and indicators for water and sanitation in the post-2015 agenda. I was the chair of the working group that was established on inequality and non-discrimination, and my role was to integrate the progressive elimination of inequalities in each goal, target and indicator. In this process, I have developed a tool to measure the elimination of inequalities, and this can also be applied to other global goals and targets. It is important for all of us to join forces and make sure that the progressive elimination of inequalities will be integrated and operationalized into the post-2015 agenda. Please share your daily experiences with your government and share possible solutions. Join the national or international consultative process on the post-2015 agenda and keep raising the importance of addressing inequalities and committing to eliminating them after 2015. We cannot and must not pave the way to the coming 15 years where disparities will become even greater and the most disadvantaged will be missed out again. Let's work together to achieve universal access to water and sanitation and to reach out to those who have been missing from the current progress achieved since 2000. Thank you very much for your attention.